some years ago at a convention, and I think it was Gen Con UK in Manchester. It was around about the time that 3rd edition D&D came out, and it was part of all the launch there. So it was when 3rd edition was pretty new, so the tournament side of things hadn't kicked off yet. So the tournaments were still 2nd edition, but 3rd edition was being introduced and launched at all of these conventions. So it was around about that time, 2000, about that. So at that convention, one of the things I do at conventions when I go to them is wander around looking for new things, because I quite like different games. I'm not a huge fan of everything being D20 or everything being this, that and the other, because there are many different ways to skin this here fish that we call role-playing games. So having a look around for different games, different ideas and so on is one of the things. So I came across this game in that convention. The company that produced it was there exhibiting, and got to talk to the designer and all of that. Now, in my ever struggles to keep my office in some semblance of tidiness, given everything that my office has to do compared to its size, a bit of a clear out or a clear up, trying to tidy things, I came across this again in my storage box of other games, as opposed to all of those games that I have got out on the shelves that I reference or play more often. And there are some very esoteric games in there, including this one, so I thought I would drag it out and tell you a little bit about it. The game's called Dark Continent. It was produced by a company called New Breed in the UK, and like I said, it was released in 2000. I think New Breed wanted to go and do more with it, more supplements, but they didn't really do much from there. I think what I picked up there was a prototype, because it doesn't have a barcode or anything like that on the box. And the box itself is all sort of assembled and glued, so whether it was, there's a definite looseness to the cover versus the actual thing. So whether what I actually picked up was a prototype or a self assembled thing or whatever, it really doesn't matter. It's just it's the game that we're going to be talking about. So Dark Continent, adventure and exploration in darkest Africa. So let's, I'll crack open and show you what's in the box first, and all the various components of it, and then I'll go and have a bit of a talk about what the game is and what it does and what's the point of it. So a box like that, about just under an inch of free space in there. You get the player's guide, which is mainly about the core rules and how they work. The Game Master Guide, which is Game Master stuff really, running the game and so on. These aren't particularly thin books, so the Game Master Guide is, looking at the back of it, 140 pages. Player's Guide runs to a little bit shy of that, 108 pages. Okay, so there's that. You get, I'll leave those two to a second. You get a catalogue of goods. The Topan Trading Company, widest range of goods and products imported from many nations, all at exceedingly reasonable prices and so on. It's basically a in-game catalogue of equipment that it's got the equipment, the game stats for the equipment in it. So it's something that you can give to the players when they're equipping themselves or buying stuff for their adventures and expeditions. That is a bit less bland than going, oh, it's in the player's book, whatever. The prices are actually also in the player's book as well. But this just gives an extra supplement to that. A gazetteer of the island of Zanzibar, with helpful advice and notes on various subjects and contributors from noted explorers and scholars. It's an in-game type description. basically describing Zanzibar and some of the bits about it. Zanzibar, well, we'll get into it a little bit when we get to what is the point of the game, but Zanzibar is like a central location for starting things. And then you get a couple of maps. That's a map of Marseland, I think, and there is a map of Abyssinia. And as you can see, the maps are largely blank. So on this map you have Zanzibar there, the island of Zanzibar there, and then the interior, or heading into the interior of Africa. You've got Mount Kilimanjaro, but there's virtually nothing else marked up. And same with Abyssinia, where you've got some bits of known bits and pieces to Zanzibar at the bottom of there. So you've got some reference back to that, then some known features and so on, and then largely blank. So we'll come into the use of these maps in a sec, but it's all tied in the expedition and what the game is about. Right, so let's give a bit on the actual rules and the way the rules work. So the rules are very, very simple and very similar to basic role-playing, Call of Cthulhu, RuneQuest, all of that kind of thing. But they are based on D10. So what you have, where you get to that, all of that role-playing game, so on, what you need, all of this, so there's the action die. There we go. So the action die is you roll a 10-sided dice against the corresponding attribute or skill. A roll less than or equal to the corresponding value is a success, while a roll greater than the value is a failure. Roll of 1 followed by a successful luck check is critical. So we're talking about a roll under system. So your target is well, I'll leave that for a sec. But you're trying to roll under the target value that you're given. So that means 1 is good in this. So if you roll 1 and then you roll a successful luck check, so luck, one of the attributes, then you get a critical. And if you roll a 10 and then fail a luck check, then it's a fumble. So there you're using, so when you're critical, you're saying you're checking your luck to see if you're converting a good roll into a critical, and if you're rolling bad, then you are rolling to try and prevent a fumble from occurring. Then it goes into, so every point above 10 that a skill or an attribute, the thing that you're rolling against, increases. What it does, it doesn't adjust that that skill so much as adjust the chance that you are going to score a critical, and it sort of limits the amount that you're getting fumbles. So that's the basic system to it. So I'll touch on BRP, and then this optional rule here explains this too. So when you're talking about, it says you may want to go and instead of using a D10, use a D100. In order to do that, then multiply everything by 10. As soon as you do that, you're going to get, you're rolling percentile dice, so it gives you the direct percentage chance of success in that particular thing. So a skill of 50 multiplied by 10 is 50, a skill of 5 multiplied by 10 becomes 50, and then rolling percentile dice against that to try and get 01250, that directly translates into a 50% chance of success. That is where this game essentially morphs from its own thing on D10 base into pretty much a parallel system to basic role playing, which is a good thing in my mind. Which, well, you'll during the course of this ramble you'll figure out why and why I say that. But it's not unknown to sort of tinker with the BRP system in this sort of way. If you take Pendragon, for example, that is a BRP system, and if anyone disagrees with that and says, no, it's not, because blah, 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 Chaosium themselves have labelled Pendragon as a BRP system. So And since they published the game, I'm going under the assumption that they know what they're talking about. And that uses a D20, so it's a basic role-playing system derivative using a D20 for its skill checks and so on. And this is loosely based on BRP and using a D10. So there we go. So there's some stuff in there. That's the basic system that works all the way through for virtually everything. And then you got a bit about the setting, which is 1800s Africa, where you have explorers going off into the wild trying to discover riches and trade routes and all of this, which is why the maps are largely blank at this period of time. Not all of Africa was known about, and the nations of Europe were struggling with each other to try and form bigger empires and riches for themselves as they possibly could, and Africa was fertile ground for that. I think some of the background there was Britain at that time had quite a large naval empire, so it was India and all of this kind of thing. So it didn't really care so much about Africa, although Britain did colonise chunks of Africa. But Africa wasn't its main focus. So for the other European powers that were, wanting to compete with Britain at the time, opening Africa up for trade and riches and colonisation and thing on, was relatively important in order to try and compete against Britain on a global scale. So this was why the period was rife with explorers of all sorts of different nations and things delving into the depths of Africa to try and, like I said, connect up trade routes and find the mythological riches hidden within all the jungles and deserts. Right. So this is a bit about character generation. If anyone's familiar with the way that Chaosium and so on lay out their character generation rules, you'll find this very, very familiar. Here's a character sheet, and here's all the bits and pieces that it means. You've got agility, endurance, you don't have appearance or intelligence or anything like that, but you do have willpower, luck, empathy, perception, and things. So a lot is left to the player's own intellect to go and figure things out, rather than a intelligence-based characteristic on there. But things like the physicality of things, strength and agility and so on, and your endurance, and ability to notice things and empathise or talk to people and what have you, charisma and stuff if you like, and resist will, and then the luck thing which comes into, like we said about the skills. But it's also a useful attribute, criticals and fumbles and so on, luck comes into that. But it also comes into other things that you might want to roll luck against to see if a character avoids or doesn't. The way that character generation works, I quite like this, and it's aspects that I use, or it's a design philosophy that I use for my own gaming, is where you pick... your picks matter. So it's not like you pick an elf and a fighter, and so you've got dark vision and you can hit people quite well with swords and all this, but it's more a cultural thing. So where they go through things like you choose your occupation, that's what you do. It's not quite a class, it's more about determining what sort of skills that your character may have learned and honed expertise in. The nationality, and to a lesser extent gender. There are some rules in here where you can use gender as an option to hone some attributes to the positive and to the negative. But nationality for sure, that goes and provides some additional bonuses and bits and pieces in there. It also determines a large amount of your renown. And your renown is something that you gather, a bit like experience or something like that, but it gives you a game currency to play with for the sort of expeditions your character will get involved with and the sort of influence that they can have over things. So renown is quite an important thing to go, and different nationalities tie into the nature of the nationalities of the time as to how renown can be acquired. There are certain things there. And there are other bits and pieces that tie into that as well. But nationality is quite a driver of the sort of things that a character can pick renown up from. And then you've got background and attribute levels and stuff like this. So background, again, goes and adds into the characteristics of your character. So where you are making some dice rolls to form some basics from it, and then all your decisions from there on feed in and build your character up. So there are a lot of games that do it that way. 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons in the 2024-25 version of it, in the way that it's now separated out species and cultures and stuff like that, it heads a little bit down in this direction. Still rather cinematic and superheroic, but it does provide some of that more flexible framework. And then games like RuneQuest is probably the epitome of all of this, because a lot of the decisions that you make in the character generation and play in RuneQuest, even down to what skills that you can learn because of the cult that you belong to. So there are games out there that follow this sort of, you make these choices and they actually feed into the attributes that your character has instead of just being in the background somewhere. I quite like that. It makes your character's background mean something more than just a few notes about how they're actually done. So then it goes on to, these are the professions. It gives you some examples of those, and the professions are really kind of tiny occupations. Tiny things, if you like, and it doesn't take much to show what an occupation is. It's just like here's a bunch of explorer, for example. It says these are the nationalities that you can belong to. In this case, American or some European nation. You get a point of science navigation. You get a point of medical first aid. You get 2 points on on 2 of cultural science, linguist, leadership, and survival. 2 points on either long arms or pistol, and 2 points on athletics, fisticuffs, leadership, and performance. So it's you got some skill points to spread around those particular skills to form the basis of what your character is like. And then you've got some archetypes to play with: jungle lord, missionary, officer, scholar, shootist, trader, Wangawana, which is the sort of native Africans that go and help. It's a Swahili word meaning sons of the free, and came to refer to those Africans who made their living as freelancers, porters, guides, and interpreters. First for Arabs and then later for Western explorers. There you go. Warrior, and that's it. And then it goes into nationalities. So you've got American, Belgian, British, Eastern European, French, German, Irish, Italian, Prussian, Scottish, coastal African, tribal African, Arab, feral, Portuguese, Sikh, Baluchi, and the rest of the world. There you go. So other nationalities always take a -1 renown penalty at the end of an adventure. After all, no one really wants to read about them in the Times now, do they? There is a lot of humour written into the rules here, and I like that. It sort of brings it brings that element of the type of setting that is trying to put forward, which is not one of colonialism and some of the nastier sides of it, but more the high adventure, high action kind of thing that is like the H. Rider Haggard and King Solomon's Mines and that sort of thing. It's trying to bring that to it. So I think there's the potential for some people to take some of the material in this in a sensitive manner, but I think it's written it handles the subject, which can be a bit of a touchy subject. I think it handles it quite well, and I think the humour that some of the bits are written in is quite apt and does a lot to diffuse what could have been some of the more sensitive elements. It's very deprecating as well. So for example, some of the stuff about the British, and it goes on about how it takes the mick somewhat about some of the characteristics of the various nationalities that are involved. Right, so it's not all. It is certainly not saying that colonialism was a good thing, and here's something that sort of promotes it and says celebrates it or in any way. It's just providing it as an opportunity for an adventure background that is used quite often in literature and so on. Certainly movies that I grew up with a lot, and things like I said, Rider Haggard and Tarzan and all of this kind of stuff. Right. So background options. There again, there's like background options just give you bonuses on things, various things. So they also tie into renown and so on. So you can pick. You got 6 points to spend on background options. There you go, and each background option costs a certain amount. You get these these bars every now and again where it's going on about famous people and what their characteristics and stats might have looked like. But, I think it's better to try and, when anything like this, it's better to try and push those famous characters more into the scenery and in reference and things. And that's the same in all of these things that are based on, like Middle Earth. If you use Gandalf and Aragorn and all of this over and over, their story is told elsewhere. Their stories are told in the books that Tolkien wrote. The famous Star Wars characters are told in the movies and things. So try and let the player characters have their own story apart from these guys. So injecting too many of those famous personalities into a role-playing game that's based on something that does a setting that does have those personalities, and sometimes, especially if they're overused, can detract from the main point of play, which is the players and their characters, which should always be the focus. But anyway, their statistics there are scattered throughout. Then we got to attributes. So there we go: strength, perception, willpower, agility, endurance, empathy, and luck. Attributes go from 1 to 10, but then you've got the ability through. And if you want to tie it into BRP, like I said, multiplying them by 10 to get those percentile rolls. There's a bit about renown and the things that characters can do in order to get renown and lose renown, and how you use renown. So you get awards for your expeditions, whether they're successful or not, for scientific discoveries, that's quite a neat idea. Your individual rewards, the rewards that you'd also get renown for, like we said about nationality. Some of the things listed there for nationalities also say, if you're this nationality doing these sorts of things, gain you renown. So spending renown, there you go. This is where it gets into how renown is used as a form of experience. So you can learn new skills, increase your attributes, and so on. Then your skills and their competencies. Competencies are a little different from skills. They tie into skills, but it gives you a bit more of a specialisation within skill areas, and give you bonuses for that. So we'll come to that. We'll come to that when it says something about it. There you go, competencies. Each skill governs a number of sub-skills known as competencies, which are learned at the rate of 1 competence per skill level. These may represent equipment you're familiar with, abilities you have learned, or a wider degree of knowledge in a similar field. So honing down into specialities. So a wide number of skills. If you are familiar with BRP, there are a lot of these skills that are very familiar. I'm not going to say that the guys from this use BRP as a reference, but it wouldn't surprise me if they had. There's quite a lot of cross-section between the way that they have their skills laid out to the way that BRP has them. So usual kind of combat skills, all that kind of stuff, and so on. Then equipment. Then we come to this expedition. I think there are 2 elements of this game which make it stand out from just being a a interesting little game that allows you to play something that is akin to a BRP type game within the setting of colonial Africa, which is the expedition side of it, and there's an element of the mass combat side, which if you've ever watched Zulu or you ever watched any of those games where any of those movies where you've got the party of explorers, and over the hill comes this just mass of tribal warriors and what have you. It's trying to emulate that side of things, but the expedition is quite a core factor. So with the expedition side of it, you've got this consult a patron, so you try and get someone to go and help you fund and assemble your expedition. You've got buy equipment, so you're equipping not just your character or whatever, but you're getting equipment in for the expedition as what you would need for that. So hire Wangwana, which is you get your porters and your bearers and so on to be able to help you carry all of that stuff that you've just bought. And then you fill in your expedition, and your expeditions have characteristics and so on. So they determine, or they record how an expedition is set up, what its kind of characteristics as a block of people doing stuff is, and some of their sort of I don't know, a lot of the success of an expedition is based on the expedition characteristics that are based on the planning of that expedition in the start instance. So it's quite an important part of the game. It's almost like I mean, they mention about scenarios, and we're going to be releasing scenarios, which to the best of my knowledge never happened. I don't think any scenarios were ever published for it. But the expedition itself, that's where that forms the backbone of the story, the game story that you are telling. So the expedition is almost like an adventure framework in and of itself, and then Games Master can weave things around, and where we've got encounters that can occur. We'll show a little bit more of that in the Games Master's book, but things that happen to the expedition along the way, and how that sort of is resolved by the players to make sure their expedition is ultimately a success and brings them renown. So this expedition stuff I really like, and I think even if you are just using this sort of thing as a BRP thing and using BRP instead of the rules for this and just using the setting, it's a worthwhile thing to go and pull in. The expedition side of it is a worthwhile thing to translate across. And I think it would work not just with Africa, but I think it would work with any kind of game where people are striking out into the wilds. Even in a fantasy game with Dungeons and Dragons, I think actually having statistics for the caravan or the expedition force that you're using, a bunch of mercenaries and caravan guards and carters and all of this kind of thing. Using a similar situation to this would actually form that sort of spine. I can think of a few things that would work for. Maybe something like maybe not the Desert of Desolation. What's the one I'm thinking of? Oh, the Master of the Desert Nomads. That might work there, where there's an expedition heading off into although that's a sort of exploration mission to try and find where the Master is going. I mean, it might work for that kind of thing. There's a number of different sort of games and scenarios and things that deal with expeditions, and I think this is worth looking at to see if that would work. Right, so this goes in a bit about patrons and Wangwana. This obviously all tying in with putting the expedition together. A bit about how to fill in the expedition sheet and what to go and do, and how to work out the expedition perception, the expedition willpower, expedition endurance, all of this kind of thing. Some of stuff on rations, because this expedition does go into a bit of the survival aspect. the general goal is to encourage you to ensure that you have got enough rations and stuff and survival equipment within your expedition equipment in order to survive, and things get a little bit difficult for you if you've misplanned that. So stuff on how expeditions work, like your movement, how that moves, the things that an expedition does as an action rather than individuals do. There's a bit about cartography, which we'll sort of come into there. This is about tribes and interactions with tribes. A bit about trade. This is where we get into some of the environmental survival stuff. This is the mass combat thing. Oh, no, this is the combat. This is just the combat rules, so individual combat rules. It's pretty much using the same skill thing, so that you D10 for, and then you get successes, criticals, fumbles, or failures, or whatever, and then you're using the effect of those skill results in order to determine damage, or to add damage to whatever from your weapon statistics and so on. So it's a relatively easy combat system and is very akin to BRP, if you're familiar with all of that. A bit about wounds and how they work. Again, they go into very similar to BRP, where you're looking at not just hit point loss, but also actual injuries and how they work, and critical hits and how those work, and so on. So someone familiar with BRP will read all of this and go, it's very, very familiar. Okay, so mass combat. So this is what I was talking about. It deals with it in quite a reasonable way. So you're generally gathering, treating a block of individuals as a single thing, but there are leadership skills that come into play for individuals, so that individuals with leadership skills can make a contribution to the mass battles and then damage en masse and so on. It also says like players with characters who find themselves in a unit taking damage in mass combat make a luck check to make sure it's not them that gets hurt. So it's pretty much it. It's quite a it's not a complicated way of doing mass combat, but it can drag a little bit. Then some bit of information about your background stuff and so on. This goes into, there are some very novel bits and pieces in there. The films are all sort of, The African Queen, The Mountains of the Moon, The Mummy Returns, Tarzan stuff is in there. There's some stuff about board games of influence. There's some role-playing game stuff, so Riffs Africa is in there, GURPS Voodoo is in there. There are the Masks of Nyarlathotep, the Jungles of Chult, which is a Forgotten Realms supplement for Dungeons and Dragons. The Ivory Triangle, that's a supplement for Dark Sun. Cthulhu by Gaslight, which is the 1800s spin-off from the Call of Cthulhu main things. For Fairy, Queen and Country, wow, that's a bit of a blast from the past as well. So Fairy, Queen and Country was a game that was released under the Amazing Engine. It's a common set of rules that then branched off into all sorts of different games that TSR did. If you've got Dungeons and Dragons, do you really need to go and produce a whole bunch of other role-playing games? But they did. I'm not sure how successful they were. They never really took with me or our little crowd, but hey-ho. Some references to Dragon and Dungeon magazine and War Games Illustrated. Is War Games Illustrated? I get the odd edition of that still when it's covering a subject that I like. I don't know if it is. Is it something that's covered in the States? Maybe an American watcher will be able to go, yeah, sure, okay, War Games Illustrated is available in the States as well. I don't know. I know it's quite a common thing in the UK. And then you've got King Solomon's Mine for fiction. King Solomon's Mine, Alan Quatermain stuff. She, Tarzan of the Apes, all of this kind of thing is in there. Right, so it's quite an extensive thing like that. Then you've got another summary of the expedition equipment. And then, of course, the obligatory character sheet, expedition sheet stuff at the back of the book. So that's the sort of general rules of things. So when we come to the running the adventure, when you've got an expedition going on, this is why these blank maps are here. So part of the goal of doing the expeditions is to also map where your expedition is going and how it's all sort of what it's trying to do. And the advice that it's going for is to actually use compasses and rulers and things that a cartographer, an expedition cartographer, would use in order to produce a reasonably good map, or at least to the quality that is provided. So there's some interesting bits and pieces going on there. There's some advice for GMs as well, where it's like, you know, if they're making successful checks to see if they've got a navigator there, and then the GM can advise them about how their map might be, the shape their map might be. And I think there's another bit of advice that says if they make a critical on this, then the GM should sort of take their map and draw in those bits that they're seeing. But there's an additional thing. Although in the GM guide we'll see when we crack into that, there are some sort of official canon maps or whatever for the setting. Because these are blank, you can really fill them in with whatever you like. As a GM, so the characters going off their expedition and they're mapping things as they're going along. As a GM, you are going to be describing what they see during their expedition. You don't necessarily have to stick to what is reality within Africa. You don't have to follow the strict rules of geography that the continent exists. In fact, I think it's quite fun if you don't, particularly because the game is not just about a reality sort of thing. There are supernatural elements, there are fantasy elements built into it, as there are in books like King Solomon's Mines and so on. So it is that adventure, action, whatever side of this sort of side of things, rather than let's go and simulate Livingstone and Stanley wandering out into Central Africa and the tedious job of mapping it all. So although it sort of recommends using those mapping tools and compasses and what have you, you don't need to go and produce some fantastic ordnance survey of the whole place, just the level of mapping of the detail that these maps show. So you can see they're not massively detailed as they go. They are detailed enough to describe what's going on in the game. Right, so that's the player's guide and the maps and things sorted out. We'll delve into the GM's guide, so I'll have a quick flick through it anyway. So this is what I mean. So this is a map of that kind of bit. You've got Mombasa, you've got Zanzibar, you've got Masai Land. You've got sort of, this is a brief, reasonably game-wise detailed version of the map, or the zoomed out version of the map that it's kind of suggested you look at, but you don't. And here we go. It's got like history versus mystery. It's sort of actually build stuff in. So some of this stuff, there is a bit on the way that it does tie into historical stuff a little bit, but really anything kind of goes. So there's a bit about languages and tribes and ethnicity. This is all sort of background stuff to help you put through. There's a note about the S word. Bit inevitable in this kind of setting, but it's how you manage the expectations on that. And the good thing about it, is that it doesn't promote it, like it doesn't promote colonialism. It passes some level of comment on it, but it's certainly not painting it in any kind of positive light. Some statistics for various NPCs and people that you might run into. Some additional detail on Wangwana, which so the GM would add in that additional personality traits or whatever, or the interaction with the player characters and the Wangwana. So this goes and provides some more information on that, or how the GM would handle that kind of thing. Then you've got something about more on sort of language and words. Then you've got some bits about creatures and so on. You've got some statistics on monsters. You've got this is about survival and disease and so on. The third horseman. No, penny drops, right? Third horseman, pestilence and so on. So that's why it's all about disease and so on. It's just a bit of a brain freeze about why that title, where that kind of connects in. But yes, I get it now. A bit of apocalypse. So this is now we're into some of the more supernatural stuff. So you got a bit about cults. You got magic and so on. So animism. Surprise, you've got sanity built in, or you've got the option to be able to use sanity, very much on the line of Call of Cthulhu. So Cthulhu's another BRP game. It ties into that. We remember that you already referenced Nyarlathotep in the books there. So animism, shaman, witch doctors, all of this kind of thing. Some cults, secret societies. Both ones that are evident within Africa itself and also within the European colonial powers that are attempting to break in there, and what their goals might be. Maybe they're sort of sitting behind the patrons that the characters are drawing upon to go and get their expeditions off the ground. So you've got their Freemasons in there, for example. So more cults and bits and pieces. So apparently African mythology is replete with animal people of all sorts of different types. Then you've got some more Jesuits, there we go. Spirits. So like I said, it's not just down to colonials going to take over chunks of Africa, but it's also about all of this, the fantasy elements and the spiritual elements, all of these kind of bits and pieces going in. So it's a bit about spiritualism, exorcism, that kind of thing. So monsters from Africa. So you've got the Nandi, who it's a monster I quite like. First introduced to my little brain through the White Dwarf scenario, Halls of Tisn Fame. There's an Nandi in that. But there you go. So different types of monsters, zombies, skeletons. These go into social interaction between different things. The class is quite important here, so it goes on about the difficulties of characters of certain classes in understanding and dealing with characters from other social classes, and the Americans gain a little bit of a penalty in this when they're trying to deal with European middle and upper classes, because they are not seeing that. So this is some of the things I was saying earlier about cartography. That is like critical success. You should throw caution to the wind and accurately mark the positions on the player's map. So this is sort of the advice that's given. So leave it to the players. What it basically is, leave it to the players as much as possible. Where their characters know more than they do, then give them a bit of a hand in accordance to the capabilities of their characters. And if their characters are out and out experts, then just give them that help to portray those characters better. And that really applies across the board with any role-playing game. So there we go. Then it comes into, there's some adventures. So this is one, Captives of Abyssinia. and there is, I won't go into all of this. There's like, it's about expedition, and there's some encounters and bits and pieces that you can fit in. Some of these that you could actually build into to other expeditions and whatnot. But this is why there's a map of Abyssinia, a blank map of Abyssinia in there, and then the other scenario, where Vulture's there and so on. That is why there is the map of Masaliland. So there we go. So bits of on King Solomon's Mind and so on. This goes into the Rift Valley. So there you go. There's the Zanzibar and stuff. So this ties in with the other blank map. So you do get some adventures floating around in the back of the GM's book that explains a little bit, gives you an example of what goes on. I don't think you need to play the game. I don't think you need to go to this level of storytelling, because I think you can make a lot of this up as you go along, really. You can take the expedition, the preparations that the players have made in their filling their expedition sheet in and working out with the patrons and so on. So, you know, having a selection of patrons available to them, and then just following that expedition through and describing things. But it helps to have some encounters pre-thought out that might come up, rather than, I think the adventures that are included in this book are more extensive than the game needs. But that's, you know, that's a personal kind of call. And then there's this. This is the last chapter of this scenario. Starts going into dinosaurs. So that's like we've gone through the Solomon's Mine type high adventure and so on. Now into Lost World type concept. Right. So that's basically it. So with the full disclosure on that I've never really played the game. That's why all the maps are pretty clean. The concepts do appeal, like, you know, the King Solomon's Mine books and movies are some of my favourite things to switch your brain off and read or watch. They don't take much in the way of thinking to go through them, and they're quite fun. I grew up with Adventures of Tarzan and the like. It's an interesting take to go and consider that colonial era. It's an interesting take on it, and like I said, some of the humour and it doesn't make light of it, but it certainly exposes some of the failings of that colonial era and some of the things that happened during it. And I think it's fun. It looks like it could be a lot of fun. If I were to play it, would I play it straight necessarily, or would I go and expand it out for using BRP? The way I am, the likelihood is that I would use some of the concepts described in the game. I'd probably left the mass combat rules out of this and use them, but put them in a BRP kind of way. I would use BRP for character generation, and I would use the basic concepts and rules for expedition planning and so on from this to do it. So I think the source material that they're putting, the humour that they've put into the writing of the game and handling some of the what could be for many the sensitive subjects that's involved, the expedition side of it, and just all of that whole cartography stuff and everything else. I think that are really the gems in this game. I wouldn't say that the system as presented is the best in the world. It's a very cut down version of BRP, which is why I personally would just go, okay, we'll use BRP, because everything that this game describes in that spiritual animism, magic and that kind of stuff is is described within BIP in one way or another, but you can certainly lift the details out of it. So as a source material for a game that gives you a foundation, that gives you that expedition stuff, which I really like the idea of, that gives you the mapping and the concepts for exploring Africa as that kind of concept, and just a whole thing. I think it's a really nice game. But there you go. Take from that as you will. I've not seen it in any kind of shops. I did have a look on eBay to see if any of second-hand copies were floating around, and what kind of ballpark figure they're looking at, and the eBay prices that people are asking for it, and on some of the second-hand places like Shop on the Borderlands and things, I would not consider. I don't think it is worth that unless you are into to collecting games for what they are currently floating around on the market for. But for gaming itself, I think it's a 25, maybe in this day and age, 25 to 30 quid game, something along that. That would be a reasonable price for it. And I'm not unhappy that it's in my collection, and seems to have survived various moves and things over the last 25 years. So that's it. Dark Continent by New Breed, and published in 2000, and a bit of an oddity of a game. Sort of never took off, but is nonetheless reasonably put together. Alright, so until next time, we've got some rambles coming up. I need to finish my Robin Hood side of it, but I need to get out with my drone to film some footage with that. There is a component that I have lost in my office, which is triggering my hunt and tidy up, or more my current tidy up. So I've appeared to lost some of my modelling tools that I need for these things. I've decided to try and get through my English Civil War backlog in miniature wargame stuff. So I'm in enforced tidy up mode, which for anyone that's seen the backdrop to my office and all this kind of stuff, you can understand how that's not necessarily ties in with my character or the way I do things. But needs must, so I'm off that. And if my continued tidy up and exploration into all the various boxes I've got floating around keeps unearthing gems like this that I haven't seen for quite some time, and bring back a few memories and give me the opportunity to talk to you guys about it, then there you go. I'm not going to be upset about that. So what I was saying, I'm missing an element that I need to build into the part 2 of the tarot mini series that I'm going on about. And then we've got, usual View of the Mayu that's coming up. I am just coming to the end of my sort of digestion of the 5th edition 2024 rule books. So once I've got through that, I will put my thoughts down in video about them. Another gem that has been unearthed in my tidy up is the original Cthulhu scenario, Horror on the Orient Express. So because I now own both the current and the original editions of that, I'm going to put a comparison between the two to see whether, I know which one is worth, but the new one is far more extensive than the original. So I would urge anyone to go down the original. But it's interesting to see, especially some of the player handouts that you got with the original that are only available now through various means, Redbubble and stuff like that. The new Pendragon Games Master book came out. I'm trawling through that to gather my thoughts on that. And one of the things I do want to take you through, the Arthurian Britain map in the new Pendragon rulebooks is absolutely gorgeous, and just received over this weekend a Redbubble poster version of that map, because in the rulebooks you get the whatever size books are version of the map, and you get sections blown up saying, oh, we're talking about this particular area now, and here is the section there, and I'm sort of sitting there going, oh, I want this at a larger scale all together, to be able to go and just go through it with a magnifying glass and see all of the bits, because it's wonderfully done. It's very evocative. The Pendragon maps in early editions were quite not so evocative. They certainly didn't have that artistic flair to them. They were more going for maybe a scholastic view of it rather than a artistic view of it. So I really am impressed with that map, and it's lovely to see it in poster form. So I'll take you through that, probably in the same video that I go through the Game Master Guide. So yeah, on we go. Oh, and now a new volume in the series of RuneQuest cults is out. I want to sort of gather them together and give an overview of my thoughts on all of that entire RuneQuest cults series, because I think that's another thing that's lovely. I mean, RuneQuest is a game that's influenced me quite a lot in the way that I perceive settings to be put together, and the way that I think the setting it has to influence player characters, the way that they are put together, and the way that they are joined to the world. It's not the right word I was looking for, but it's close enough. So instead of just being, here's my Dragonborn paladin that doesn't really have any attachment to the world whatsoever. I've written about 9 pages of backstory to it, but it also doesn't have any kind of huge bearing to the world. I much prefer it where the world influences the player character, and therefore the player character is part of the world, not just some veneer that's been slapped down on it. And so that's one of the reasons why RuneQuest appeals to me so much, and by extension BRP, because BRP is a system that really does allow that to be put in place in quite an elegant way. So yeah, there we go. Lots in the works. Not enough time to do it all, as per usual, but I'll plough through and get it through as we go. Also, we'll be helping my wife set up her own YouTube channel, which won't be on gaming. It'll be more on the arts and crafts projects that she gets involved in and she enjoys to do, and to give her some impetus in actually finishing some of the ones that she's got in progress. Yeah, there we go. Alongside the full-time job that I do anyway. This is not my career. This is my hobby, and I'm sharing my love of this hobby and all sorts of other things with you, rather than what I do for a day-to-day 9 to 5. So yeah, right, until the next video, I hope this ramble you found interesting at some level, and I'm going back to revel in the fact that McLaren managed to get 2 1-2s in the Miami Formula 1 over the course of this weekend, which has made me happy quite a lot. So farewell, take care.